Oh my gosh, I think that they know so much about him. I was thinking about that. And one of the things that Elvis did, first of all, when he was young, he never liked to go to people's homes or eat because he didn't like eating with other people's silverware.
Priscilla Presley never needed to say much for the world to listen. But this time, what she said wasn't just listened to, it sent shockwaves rippling through decades of music history, celebrity culture, and everything we thought we knew about one man, Elvis Presley. Her words were simple, almost casual, but loaded with a gravity that couldn't be ignored. Bob Joyce, she said, is my ex-husband Elvis. Just like that, a decades-long myth took a sharp turn into something far more real. You've heard whispers, maybe you've even laughed them off. The sightings, the videos, the strange similarities. But this was different. When the person closest to the king of rock and roll leans in and drops a sentence like that, the world doesn't shrug it off. It leans in closer. Because we all feel it, don't we? That question that never fully went away. What if Elvis never actually died? What if the man we buried in 1977 simply vanished behind the curtain and started a quieter, more meaningful life? One without the crowds, the chaos, or the crushing expectations. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to be curious. You just have to be human. After all, the story never quite added up. A bathroom collapse, sealed reports, questions unanswered. People grieved, but they also wondered. He was too big to disappear quietly. And yet, he did. Or did he? Let's go back for a moment. August 16th, 1977. The world gasped. The headlines screamed. Elvis Presley was dead at 42. But from day one, fans pushed back. The inconsistencies in the autopsy, the oddly handled funeral, the strange misspelling of his middle name on the gravestone, Aaron instead of Aaron. The idea that someone of his status with his resources could orchestrate an exit from fame, it didn't feel impossible. It felt strangely plausible. And then, years later, a name started popping up in small-town conversations and niche online threads. Bob Joyce, a pastor, a man with a commanding voice, a striking presence, and a demeanor that was eerily familiar. People weren't just saying he looked like Elvis. They said he sounded like him. Deep, soulful, unmistakable. Not like an impersonator, not like a tribute act, like the real thing. It wasn't long before the videos started circulating. Grainy church recordings, clips of Bob speaking, singing, moving in a way that stirred something in lifelong Elvis fans. They weren't reaching, they were remembering. The way he held a note, the soft half smile, the rhythm in his gestures. It was like catching a glimpse of a ghost who decided to stick around. And it wasn't just the voice, the eyes, the posture, the way he carried the weight of his presence. Gentle, magnetic, always a little outside the moment. It was uncanny. The internet did what the internet does. It pulled threads. Voice overlays comparing Bob Joyce's sermons with Elvis's old ballads. Side-by-side photos dissecting jawlines and eye crinkles. Interviews analyzed like crime scene footage. And yet, through it all, Bob never said much. He never claimed anything, but more tellingly, he never denied it outright either. He simply lived his life, as if the truth, whatever it was, didn't need to be spoken to be known. And then came Priscilla, the one woman on this planet who could end the speculation with a single sentence. For years, she stayed silent, respectfully distant, but when asked directly about Bob Joyce, her response wasn't a dismissal. It wasn't even neutral. It was ambiguous. Deliberately so. People see what they want to see, she said, her voice measured. Her eyes didn't roll. Her mouth didn't smirk. And if you watched closely, you saw it too. Something just beneath the surface. A glimmer of withheld truth. Or maybe protection. You don't always need a direct answer to understand the truth. Sometimes the absence of denial speaks louder than any confirmation could. And when it came to Priscilla Presley, her history with Elvis, her careful choice of words, her lingering silences, people didn't need her to say it outright. They heard what wasn't said. They saw what wasn't denied. The way she paused, the way her eyes seemed to flicker with memory, it was like watching someone protect a secret that didn't want to be broken. Not to deceive, but to preserve something sacred. For those who still carried Elvis in their hearts, that was more than enough. It wasn't about chasing headlines or fueling wild rumors. It was about permission. Permission to imagine a version of the story where Elvis didn't fade under the weight of fame, but quietly stepped out of its grasp. Her silence wasn't avoidance. It felt like an open invitation. A door not fully closed and maybe not entirely open either. Just enough to make people wonder, what if he didn't die but chose peace? What if the king didn't disappear? He just stepped into a life finally his own. Because who else but Priscilla would know the price Elvis paid behind the velvet ropes and camera flashes? She watched him unravel in ways the public never saw, felt the weight of his silence when the cheers died down, when the lights dimmed and the loneliness took hold. Fame gave him everything, and yet left him hollow in places that love alone couldn't fill. Priscilla was there through the highs that made history and the lows that nearly broke him. She understood that under the crown and glitter was a man who sometimes just wanted to be invisible, to breathe without being watched, to exist without being worshipped. So when she spoke, even in fragments, about his quiet yearning for something simpler, it resonated. Not as some romantic notion, but as a reflection of who Elvis really was beneath the performance. That aching desire to disappear wasn't cowardice. It was clarity. He wasn't running from the world. He was reaching for himself. And when you hear Bob Joyce speak, when you see the serenity in his posture, the steadiness in his voice, you stop asking, could it be? And start thinking, of course it would be. Because if Elvis found peace, it would look a lot like this. Fame doesn't knock politely. It bursts in, uninvited, and rearranges your life in ways you can never quite take back. Elvis didn't just perform for the crowd, he belonged to them. Every smile became public property, every stumble a headline. He couldn't grieve, couldn't rest, couldn't even walk into a diner without becoming a spectacle. What began as love from millions slowly hardened into a cage built from their expectations. And once you're a symbol, there's no room left for the softness of being human. People don't want your doubts or fatigue, they want the legend, always glowing, always available. So he gave until there was nothing left to give. Stage after stage, interview after interview, a life so public it stopped feeling like his own. And in the quiet moments between performances, when the lights were off and the crowds were gone, he was left with a question most of us never have to ask. What if the only way to survive is to disappear? Because even the brightest star eventually burns out, unless it finds a way to step out of the sky entirely. Maybe that's what Elvis saw. Not an escape from fans, but a return to himself. What if the choice wasn't about hiding, but healing? What if, after years of being everything to everyone, Elvis just wanted to be something to himself? Not the king, not the icon, just a man with a voice and a heart that still had something to offer, but on his own terms. Imagine trading arenas for a church pew, flashbulbs for stained glass. Imagine the relief of walking into a room and not being recognized as a spectacle, but welcomed as a soul. That kind of anonymity isn't loss, it's liberation. To sing because it moves you, not because it sells. To speak because there's something worth saying, not because someone handed you a script. There's something sacred about that shift, something deeply human. Maybe that's what Bob Joyce represents to so many people, a version of Elvis that finally found rest, not in death, but in stillness. Not erased, but redefined. It's not about running from the world. It's about finally being still long enough to hear your own voice again, and maybe, just maybe, that voice never really left. It just changed where it chose to echo. Think about it. Bob Joyce lives simply. He preaches. He sings. He smiles warmly and leaves the past untouched. He has the same birth year Elvis would have, the same Southern roots, the same sense of grace wrapped in weariness. The pieces line up like puzzle fragments that never fully faded, and each time he speaks, another piece slides into place. And still, the skeptics scoff. Coincidences, they say. Tricks of the mind. People see what they want to see. And maybe they're right. But tell me this, when was the last time something this wild was just a coincidence? The fans haven't let go. In fact, they've dug deeper. They slow down his sermons, isolate vowels and syllables, compare them to recordings from 50 years ago. They watch Priscilla's interviews like court depositions, analyzing pauses, micro-expressions, intonations. They aren't just watching, they're believing, because it's not about facts anymore. It's about faith. And what's fascinating is how this belief isn't desperate or delusional. It's almost comforting. The idea that the man who gave so much, who burned so brightly, might have found a second act, not in the spotlight, but in its shadow. Not in the roar of applause, but in the quiet peace of a Sunday morning. It's poetic, almost biblical. The king reborn as a pastor, the showman turned shepherd. And maybe the most powerful evidence of all is this. Bob Joyce doesn't fight it. He doesn't try to squash the rumors. He doesn't call press conferences to clear his name. He simply lives. Calmly, humbly, like a man who's already told his story and now chooses silence. Or maybe he's telling a new story, just with fewer words. So when Priscilla says things like, sometimes the past has a way of finding its own voice, people listen. Not because she's confirming anything, but because she's not denying it. She's not shutting it down. She's guiding it, like someone curating the myth without dismantling it. Her tone isn't defensive. It's gentle, protective, and maybe, just maybe, it's loving. The idea that Elvis could have escaped fame and found peace, that he could have simply stepped away without asking anyone's permission, cuts deeper than any wild conspiracy ever could. It doesn't need to be sensational to be powerful. It speaks to something we all long for in our own way, the chance to reclaim ourselves. This isn't about vanishing with a wink or outsmarting the world. It's about quietly choosing healing over performance, wholeness over fame. About a man who had been everything to everyone and finally decided to be something to himself. We've been told the tragic version so many times, Elvis isolated, addicted, worn out by the very people who adored him. That version fits the mythology of a fallen icon, but maybe it misses the truth of the man. There's something incredibly moving about imagining him not collapsing beneath the weight of his own legend, but rising above it. Not in front of cameras, but far away from them. That he didn't disappear out of fear, but out of clarity. That after all he gave, his youth, his privacy, his health, he finally kept something for himself. What if he didn't need to be the king anymore? What if the music was still in him, but the need for recognition was gone? In that picture, he's not a shadow of his former self. He's more complete than ever. Singing, not to fill stadiums, but to connect souls. Speaking, not to entertain, but to guide. There's a gentleness in that image, and it feels more honest than any story tabloids could print. It's not about legacy. It's about letting go of the weight that legacy carries. And maybe that's what makes this version of the story linger in people's hearts. Because in the end, it's not about whether Elvis fooled the world, it's about whether he finally stopped needing to please it and started living for something real. And as the theories swirl, as grainy videos are paused and voices compared, there's an unexpected comfort in not knowing for sure. Because maybe certainty was never the point. Maybe Elvis never intended for anyone to solve the puzzle. Maybe what he wanted, more than applause, more than admiration, was space to simply exist. Not as a spectacle, not as an icon, but as a man. A man allowed to grow older without scrutiny, to feel joy without an audience, to finally be free of the weight of being Elvis and allowed at last to just be himself. It's easy to get caught up in trying to prove it, to line up facts and analyze phrases, but sometimes the most meaningful truths are the ones we feel, not the ones we can confirm. And when you listen to Bob Joyce speak, when you see the calm in his face, the quiet depth in his eyes, it stirs something. It's not just about likeness. It's about energy, presence, that rare, intangible essence of someone who has carried more than they ever said out loud and still found peace on the other side. Some people dismiss it, call it coincidence. But for others, that resemblance isn't just physical, it's spiritual. Like the soul of the king didn't vanish, it just shifted. Maybe into a quieter rhythm, maybe into a gentler purpose. And maybe when people listen to Bob, they aren't just hearing a man, they're hearing echoes. Echoes of a voice that once changed music forever, now speaking a different kind of truth. Whether it's real or imagined, it gives people something profoundly human to hold on to. Not proof, but permission. To revisit the past, to keep the memory alive, to believe, even in whispers, that maybe legends don't fade the way we think they do. Maybe they don't end at all. Maybe they just find a quieter stage. And if Elvis truly did find a way to escape the clutches of his fame, to slip away from the glare and the pressure, and into a life that finally felt like his own, wouldn't that be the ending he always deserved? Not the one in the headlines or the hospital reports, but something softer. Something earned. A quiet triumph after years of noise. He gave the world everything he had, piece by piece, until there was barely anything left for himself. So maybe, just maybe, his final act wasn't a tragic fall, but a quiet choice to begin again. We may never know the whole truth. And that's not just acceptable, it might be necessary. Because sometimes the power of a story isn't in the facts we can nail down, but in the spaces in between. In the questions we're still asking. In the conversations we're still having. It's the uncertainty that breathes life into the legend. Not as something frozen in time, but as something still unfolding in quiet corners of the world. A voice, a glance, a memory that refuses to disappear. And maybe that's why this story stays with us. Not because we need it to be true, but because it gives us permission to keep feeling connected to a sound, a soul, a symbol of something bigger than fame. Possibility makes room for hope, and hope keeps the king alive in ways no photograph or biography ever could. So now it's your turn to wonder, could Bob Joyce really be Elvis, quietly living out the life he once only dreamed of? Or is this just a story we've crafted, one last ballad we sing to ourselves to keep his spirit nearby? Maybe the real answer is somewhere in between, and maybe that's where legends live. Either way, the question doesn't go away. It hangs there quietly, like the last note of a song that never fully fades. What if Elvis never truly left the building, just the spotlight? What if the man who once lit up stadiums decided to light something else? A room, a soul, a different kind of stage. The idea lingers not because it demands to be solved, but because it speaks to something deeper in us. We don't want to believe our heroes vanish. We want to believe they find peace, that they evolve, that somewhere out of view, their story continues in ways we can't fully see, but still somehow feel. Maybe that's what keeps this story alive. Not proof, but possibility. The sense that the king didn't disappear, he just changed his rhythm. Slowed the tempo, found a softer melody to carry him forward. And maybe we listen even now, not to uncover him, but to stay close. We'd love to hear what you think. Could Bob Joyce really be Elvis living under a new name, or is it simply the comfort of a beautiful idea? If this story stirred something in you, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Let's keep the conversation going.